Well, it's now 1 o'clock here in Boston. So, hello and welcome to TransForm Tuesday. My name is Dave McCormick. I'm VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. And I am pleased to present today Nikos Kazantsis, who's a lead solutions engineer, or one of our lead solutions engineer here at Alpha. And what Nikos has put together today is really cool. It is a TransForm application using quite a few really cool features, especially lookups, which we'll get into in a minute. But we're going to take a step back because some of the people who are here on today's webinar are new. So Nikos is going to do just a quick overview of Alpha TransForm in general and sort of see how it fits together as part of a overall solution. And then he's going to dive into the application that he's built. And then he's going to dive further into the application that he's built and actually show off some of the custom code that he's done to do some of the more special features. So if you're into TransForm, I think you are going to love today's session. So let's get started. Let me take Nikos here off mute. Hello, Nikos. Are you there?
Dave, I'm here. Hello.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. So you should see a dialog box on your screen.
Yes, I do.
And I am looking at a PowerPoint, which says Alpha Software and TransForm underneath it.
Okay, so that's correct. So hello again, everybody. As Dave said, due to the audience today, we'll start with a short overview of TransForm as a platform and as a solution, and then we'll dive into the application sample and some more details there. And obviously, there's a Q&A at the end, so anything you need clarified, we'll be here to try to help to answer. So, as an overview, TransForm is a platform offered by Alpha Software, and as a platform, it has a number of components. So most of you will probably be aware of the mobile part of it, which is obviously a major component, but it's not the only one and not the only important one. So TransForm starts with a backend, and the important thing to remember is that Alpha offers the complete backend required for the TransForm platform to operate. That means you don't need to bring along your own application server, you don't need to bring your own database, you don't need to host it. All of that is handled by Alpha Software on Amazon infrastructure, actually the same infrastructure that Alpha Cloud runs on. So the backend is installed there, it's working and maintained and supported by Alpha. We have a web interface, which you may be familiar with, which is the TransForm Central environment. And this is the environment where we build out the various forms or applications in a more generic term that people will use in their mobile app when using the application in the field. So we do basic things like create forms, which we call form types. These are the templates. These are the individual forms that people may need to fill in the field. We manage the users of the account under which we are doing all of this per company, per organization. We assign permissions and roles to the users and to the system in general so that we can do various combinations of who is permitted to see what at various points. And we have a management console, which allows us to view the data collected from the people filling in data through the mobile app. So the mobile app is a standard app, which we call the TransForm Filler, where we start with one or more form types, and we populate form instances, so multiple equipment inspection forms, for example. And this, as we said, is a standard application available on both app stores, and it is just one application that you need to have on your mobile device for any and all of the form types that you may need. Just one data-driven application managing the whole system. And in the end, last but not least, we have the integration options, which have expanded significantly the past few months, which now allow us to not only remain within TransForm as a platform. So up until this point here, we have stayed within the TransForm solution and environment. But here we are now able to connect with external entities and sources. And these integration directions are either outbound towards a third-party system or inbound from a third-party system. The inbound has been there essentially from the start of TransForm via the TransForm API, which allows an external system to create, read, update, or delete data as you would manually through the web interface. But we also have a number of outbound options, which are in-app AJAX requests. And if you're not familiar with what this means, it will become evident in the equipment inspection sample that we'll show in a minute. This is a very powerful way to connect to external systems and be able to retrieve data or even update data on those systems. We have automatic on-submit events. When forms are being submitted, then perform automatic actions on them. And we have integration also with Zapier, which is a third-party service that allows connectivity to a large number of existing commercial applications so that you can exchange data with those applications as it is submitted into TransForm to take them to the other application that you may be using. There's an optional section here, which we won't go into here, but this is the Alpha Anywhere component, which is the rapid application development platform that Alpha Software has. And the advantage of using Alpha Anywhere in combination with TransForm is that it provides a TransForm-aware environment. So when you're building components such as dashboards, reports, back end or back office, generally components and apps, you can build those components more quickly because they are, as I said, TransForm aware. So the connectivity with the TransForm backend and the TransForm database through the application server is already built into a number of these components. So it becomes very quickly, very easy to complete the solution if you want any custom functionality built in the backend, again, such as reporting or dashboarding. So again, very quick overview. Many of you may have already used and be aware of all this, but just to have an overall approach of what we are discussing when we mean the complete TransForm platform. Okay, so let me jump now to the example application that we built. So as we said, within the TransForm environment, we build one or more form types. These correspond to the various paper forms, for example, that would be in use today in an actual organization. So a fire inspection form, or an equipment inspection form, or a site survey, or a project punch list. All of these are form types. And one of these that we'll see today is a form type called equipment inspection. And the equipment inspection app is meant to record inspections of pieces of equipment in a specific site. So there is a site visit, one or more people visit the site, and they need to perform inspection of equipment in that site. And the purpose of the application built in TransForm is to not only log the information needed as part of the inspection, so essentially the mirror of the paper form in digital form, but also to provide additional helper functionality to make the complete process of the site visit and the dispatch of the person to the site and the information that they may need to look up during their equipment inspection to make that all the more rich and useful to improve the whole process. So what can we do with the equipment inspection application? We log basic data such as the date and time, and basic information for the inspection. We can look up the location of the site where we're doing the inspection via address, coordinates, and even do map navigation. We can do inspection for multiple equipment types. So an organization may be inspecting only boilers in the boiler minder example that Dave has presented in previous sessions. But you also might have an organization which might need to inspect multiple different types of equipment within the same site, and each of them with a different checklist. So we'll need to be able to support that as well. Now, the enhancements that we discussed have to do with, some of them have to do with lookup. So when you're inspecting a piece of equipment, you might want or need to access documents, manuals, data sheets for that equipment, but for that specific equipment that you're maintaining at that moment. So you'll see how we can, we have a way to enrich that process. And then finally, log tasks as they are performed during the inspection. And needless to say, or to repeat here, that the example that will be shown here is exactly that. It's just an example. It might look in the end like a complete, ready to use out of the box application, but all of that is built via simple tools, via the form designer, and then downloaded to mobile devices. So whatever is seen in this application sample can be extended easily by the customer themselves. So whoever is using TransForm as a customer, as an end user, has the capability to take the sample, for example, that we have here, and update it, expand it, modify it, add more features. This is not a closed black box type of application. So I will very quickly jump through the presentation here, because obviously it'll be much more impressive to show it in the actual live demo. But I do want to cover the basic concepts that will be, and the basic screens that we'll be seeing today. So we have a main screen, an intro screen, where we show the overview of what we're doing. So who's the user that logged in? What is the site that we're visiting? Some links to some further pages, sections further on. Start of visit, end of visit, and location when visiting. Now, we can do some very basic things like automatically fill in some fields the moment we enter a form. As you see here, my name was automatically picked up and entered. I did not enter this myself. We have groups of info that correspond to something. So usually when people need to visit a large number of sites, instead of specifying all of this information, they usually organize their portfolio of sites via site codes. And then this corresponds to a set of info for each of those sites. And then we have the sections corresponding to the actual equipment inspections. So we start with a blank form. Now, initially we would want to set, obviously, which site the visit is concerns, and we would need to, in a standard, let's say, paper form, we'd need to fill in this information manually about where we went, the address, city, site notes, address, wherever else we're going. Now, this is obviously a manual process, and it can be set up to work like this. We can improve this process by providing here a drop-down list. So we can predefine the values of the names of the sites that we may be visiting, which is an improvement from the previous section, but we still need to fill in this information manually. What we can take advantage of in this case is what we call a lookup. So at some point, an organization usually has a record of all their data that they utilize when working in the field. In this case, we have a list of sites that, for example, are in the contract of this equipment inspection organization. And we have site codes, and then these correspond to specific addresses, coordinates, site notes, and other information. So what we can do with TransForm using TPL, the TransForm programming language, is that not only can we build a lookup list that is dynamic, so instead of just typing in statically when we're creating the form, we have 3 site codes, these 3, we can make a lookup and say, okay, go to wherever we have stored this data repository. And in the example that you'll see, we're using Google Sheets, for example. And look up this column here. So whenever I click this field, I get a lookup of the values that are in this column, dynamically loaded at that moment from Google Sheets. But then when I load this, also pick up the rest of the information and fill it in here. So I save all of this typing because I already have the reference that I need somewhere else in my system. And even if I don't, I can just easily create something like Google Sheets and store and enter all that information there. So immediately we can see the value of lookups, not only for saving time as we enter data automatically versus manually, but also accuracy in saying I only need to know which site I've been assigned to go to for a visit, and all of the other information is picked up for me. And having that information picked up, and we have, as we discussed, multiple sources where that could be done. And in the demo that you'll see, we actually have two cases. We have a Google Sheet for live online lookup, but we also have an on-device database. So even if we're not online, we can still do that lookup and still retrieve the data that we need from an on-device database that we configure. Now, not only can we load this data, look it up, and fill in our form automatically, but now that we've got this data or part of this data, we can use it to do further, to include further enhancements. So an obvious requirement when given site location details to a field crew is for them to navigate to the site. And having the coordinates, via TPL, we can do is just add a Google Maps link where we automatically pass in the destination coordinates. So the moment we have selected the site, all we did was select the site from a dropdown. All this information is filled in, coordinates are filled in, and we navigate the site, we automatically have the navigation component ready and working to take us to the site. We fill in the basic data, so date that we came in via a normal date picker. We click to say log our location, so we can confirm that we were actually at that location. Something you'll see in the app which is very useful is once I have a number of these, the moment I pick the site and I have a site name, I can include this reference on the top of my form, but also in my form list. So as I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inspections in a day or in a week, I can identify from the dynamic data that I entered, so the building name, as I'm filling in multiple forms, which ones I'm actually instantiating in this case. Otherwise, without this dynamic info, all of these would just look similar, and there would be no way for me to understand which one was which unless I clicked inside and went and saw the data. Now, to actually go and start inspection, when we click the inspected link, we see a blank screen. And this is the concept of data groups, which again, you may have encountered in previous sessions with Dave, but I'd just like to go over it again. So we start with a blank section, a blank page. And why is that? The comparison with a paper form is that in a paper form, we would have predefined sections on the printed sheet, which would say what I'm meant to inspect and the values that I would need to collect. But this is a static setup. This means in this specific print form, I would only be able to inspect generators, and I would only be able to inspect 4 of them. And I would only be able to collect this type of info for them. Well, in a digital form, we don't need to be that restricted. We are flexible with data groups. So a data group is the equivalent of giving an arbitrary number of answers to a single question. The single question is, what am I inspecting? What is the equipment that I'm inspecting? And I can add one answer to this and all the relevant fields underneath, or multiple answers with the relevant fields underneath. And I just add and remove as needed. So when I add my first equipment type, my first inspected equipment, I'm asked which equipment type is it? So I pick generator, for example, and then I'm ready to proceed with the inspection for this generator. If I want to inspect a second item in the same site as part of the same visit, I just click again and I get a second section, and we'll see it in the demo. If I made a mistake and I want to remove it, I just remove it. So this is flexible and allows me to build a form with no more and no less than is actually needed. So our detail section has equipment data, a checklist of what we need to go through, and then the actions performed. For the equipment data, we have things like serial number, a model number. These we can scan via barcode, or we can manually enter in if needed. And then again, going to the lookup functionality, yes, we could type in all of these manually. So type in the manufacturer, type in what type of equipment is it and the specifications. But we can also include lookups in this. So when we scan a barcode and we get a value back, if that value matches something we've already defined in our lookup database for equipment, it can automatically fill this in for us because it knows that this model number corresponds to these. So we're saving time filling this in, and we're getting accurate data that this is the equipment that was actually located at the site. But even more extensive lookups means that I could actually link to files that I've preloaded on my device. So if I have 100 different generators that I'm maintaining, I can include those 100 data sheets or manuals on my on-device database, on my on-device file storage, and link it through the on-device database. So the moment this model number was picked up, the reference finds the relevant document that corresponds to this, and clicking on it, I can just read it on my device. And remember, this is offline. I don't need to be online to be able to look this up. So this immediately saves time if you're looking up dimensions for a generator without needing to go in and measure them manually, or if you want power ratings for something, or if there's an error LED flashing in the front of the switch and you don't know what that flashing LED means, you can have a manual with you, the exact manual corresponding to the model of the equipment that you have in front of you to explain to you more quickly without you needing to go into search it.
Nikos, can I just add something at this point, and that is
Sure.
that all these abilities to do lookups, online lookups, offline lookups, these are features that you do not find in what we call the forms products of the world. This is not out of the box solution things, but you could of course do this same sort of thing in Alpha Anywhere or in a low code product. But the difference is with TransForm, like all the stuff you're showing us, you could put together an app like this. What did it take, a day or two, versus Alpha Anywhere, which would probably take you about a month or so. Would that be probably a fair statement to say?
That is absolutely correct and fair, and thanks for adding this. I sort of got carried away with features and not mentioning the basic part of this, which is that all of what we're seeing here requires minimal configuration. And don't let the TPL, the programming language section, statement scare people who don't want to code, because that is actually a benefit. Most of the alternatives that you might find, so Alpha Anywhere is a way to build any type of app that you would like, but it requires it has a lot of features built in, but you still need to do a lot of hand coding yourself. The other alternative, which is the ready forms type of products, we just allow you to place fields on screen and then just fill them in. It's very difficult to get much further from that point. So many of the things that we just described now, so going to Google Sheet to pick up data and then filling automatically other fields based on the results of that lookup, or creating an on-device storage and an on-device database and doing queries on it and getting the results back and opening PDFs, those features cannot easily be found in out-of-the-box solutions like we can configure them here. With TransForm, the advantage is, exactly as Dave said, speed of implementation of the kind of features that we see here. And because there's a language behind it, it is not fixed. It is not an out-of-the-box solution. Remember, on the second slide of this PowerPoint was that this is just an example. This is not an out-of-the-box app that does only the things that are shown here. The TPL gives us flexibility to add more custom functions, more powerful functions, rather than just adding fields, which you can do easily with standard types of forms products. So thanks for that, Dave.
Thank you.
So going to our checklist, remember for this sample, in this example, we picked a generator as our equipment to be inspected. So the example that we see here, the checklist that appears, is relevant to a generator. So we do a start-stop test, we check the running hours, and we check the fuel tank level. And the way we enter this data is, if it's a numeric value, we get a numeric field. If it's a selection of values, we just click the values as they are there. We take a photo, we fill in text, and so on. And with actions performed, if we have specific activities that we did for each item, again, via the data group concept, we don't need to predefine a grid of 3 by 2 and only log those. We log as many as needed. So every action that was performed as part of the inspection of this element of this unit of equipment is logged for this one. Now, Going back to the inspection level, I'm adding a second unit that I installed, and I'm inspecting, in this case, a boiler. And inspecting a boiler, I get the same type of screen that I saw before, but now, and Dave, I know this is familiar to you because I just copied directly.
You stole my screenshot. I love it.
Your form. This is the checklist that would be relevant for a boiler. So within the same form, I can have multiple checklists depending on what equipment I chose to be doing the inspection on, and I can have a one or more, as we said. And again, all the warnings that I also stole from you, which are if you mark a specific value, then you get a warning. If you mark any other values, you don't get anything. If you log a higher reading than what is expected, then you get a warning and you need to press a confirmation. So most of these capabilities, the validations, the checks, the multiple sections are easily and flexibly achieved via TPL. And finally, we close out the form. We store the date of closing. We mark the change of status of the form to a different status, let's say submitted, and we complete. And we sync the changes. Remember, everything that we've done up to this point is stored on the phone. There is no separate save action. Everything you enter at any moment is automatically saved on the device. But then upload now actually gets it out to the server, out to the back end, which means that it's now visible to the back office. And then we can start another inspection from the same point. So I think that's enough for a PowerPoint. And let's go to the live demo. Dave, is this coming through okay?
It's coming through just fine. I see what is that, a tablet I'm looking at? Android tablet?
That is a tablet.
It disappeared.
Okay,
it's back. All right.
I just want to take this out of the way so that it becomes more clear. So we just have this. So the reason I'm showing this on a tablet, this is an 8-inch Android tablet. And the reason I'm showing it on a tablet is that for those of you who have been using TransForm before, I'm going to show you another interesting feature, which you may have noticed in the screenshots earlier, but I will point them out now. So let's start our equipment inspection by going to the app form and saying, here I have a list of all, these are the form types. So I've got a number of them, but I start with equipment inspection. And as we noticed, the username is automatically filled in. And the reason we want to do that, because this is a static log. The form automatically stores which is the user that created the form, but that's linked to the account. But I'm actually storing the username that was actually used when the form was created, so that even if that user is removed later on, that log still stays there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my settings and choose where I'm getting my data from. And let's say I'm going to pick my on-device database. And we'll discuss a little bit later on how that data gets there and placed on the device. So first thing I want to do is mark which site I am visiting. And as you'll see, when I click my site code, I get a drop-down of values. Remember the site codes that come from the lookup from my on-device database. Now, on my site location details, you'll notice that all the fields are blank because I haven't chosen a site yet. So when I go to the site code and say I choose this site code, Boston 001, then when I go to site details, all of these have been filled in. They were filled in by a query that was done on the on-device database with the parameter of the site name. So if I pick another one, it updates that data there. So it's no longer Indigo Tower, it's High-Rise 5. Okay. So this is the data that comes back. Having these coordinates, as we said, if I just press navigate to site, then you'll see an in-app browser opens up with the destination already marked from those coordinates, and it already shows me at that location. I can continue to navigate, and I will pick my location manually because where I am now in another continent, it won't make sense to ask it to do it automatically. So picking up the location, it plots a route as a route. Now, this is an in-app browser, which means when I press, you're not seeing this, but when I'm pressing my back button on my device, I go back to my app. It's not a separate process that launches. It is running inside the TransForm app. I can do even more things, like for some visits, again, like Dave's boiler monitor example, the weather forecast for the day of the visit is critical to know if you're going to shut off someone's boiler or not. So in this case, based again on the coordinates, we can do a weather forecast. We're passing in to a specific URL that gives us a weather, the lat and long of the site that we just picked up, and there's the weather forecast. Okay, so having picked the site and having selected the date of visit and time, let's say now, we are ready to start our inspection. You see the counter says equipment inspected 0 units. We get a blank screen. Remember, this is dynamic. We add and remove as needed. So we add a piece of equipment. What is the equipment that we're adding? Let's say we're adding a generator. So when I go inside, if I go to my checklist, I will see the checklist that corresponds to the generator. If I add another piece of equipment, and I pick this to be boiler, and I go to my checklist, I now see the boiler related questions as we showed in the PowerPoint. Okay. Now, this is the equipment data. Now, there's a serial number, there's a model number, as we said, manufacturer description, and equipment files. So I can either enter these manually, or I can scan. And I know this is a live demo, but I'm going to try it anyway. And I'm going to try to scan a model number that I know that I already have in my database. So there it is.
Nice.
And notice now that it has already filled in what this corresponds to. And I'll show you a little bit later where this data came from and how we placed it there. Okay. Now, and not only did we do that, but if I click on the equipment files, it now looks up and finds the document that's on the device that's relevant to that item. Again, via a mapping in my database. And now that I've done that, I can just say open file. It asks me, and this is not necessarily a PDF. Whatever file this could be, and I've added on my device, could be a video, it could be an image. The device opens it natively with whatever app is meant to open that document or that file. Okay, so I've got the document I need for my inspection. At the moment, I chose which specific equipment I'm maintaining. Okay, and I can continue with my inspection. I can set pass fail. I can take photos. I can annotate. I'm sure you've seen all these in previous sections. So, and again, with actions performed, this is dynamic. So adding new action, I can add as many as I need or remove one if I made a mistake, and only those actions are logged. Okay. Now, what I wanted to show you also is the following. Remember, we said that all of this is done when we started with an on-device database. And this is the advantage that it works offline. So I could have, gone into airplane mode, and all of this would have still worked. And so that's fine. But there's also another option of doing it online. And the advantage of online is that the updates can be instantaneous. So you saw that in my listing here, I only have 3 options because those are the ones I've defined in my on-device database. But let's say I have a Google Sheet with the same type of data. So when I point to Google Sheets, if I go here now and say I am now using Google Sheets as my reference, and I click the site code, I get the same drop-down list because now it went out to Google Sheets, checked this, and actually found the same values. But however, the advantage of using Google Sheets is that I can update my data live by just going to the spreadsheet and just adding more. I don't need to download anything to the device. I can just do the updates like this. So it's saved. I go back to my app. I say lookup. I've defined Google Sheets as the lookup. So now you'll see that I've got my new site there. And when I do that, there's the new site. So the online option obviously requires a network, but has the advantage of almost immediate connectivity and update to the latest data I might have in my back office. Okay, so I've run through my inspection. I can complete it. I can mark it as done. So I can set a date timeout. So later on we can calculate things like hours worked on site and so on. And then I can change my status to say change status to whatever is permitted, submitted, approval. There are various workflow rules that define what can be done with each form as it's being completed. And remember, all of this has been stored on the device up until now. There it is. But when I upload, then all of the information that I captured is now pushed up to the server. And being pushed up to the server, I can go to my management console and review this data. So I go to my equipment inspection, and there it is. Alpha Office, those are the details. That's what I marked. Okay, so again, the data capture, the standard data capture process, which is have a checklist and fill it in, has been enhanced in a number of ways here. We are automatically picking up location data for where we need to visit, where we can navigate, we can get weather, we can have dynamic checklists changing based on the equipment that we're using. We can scan, do barcode scanning, and do lookup on device, automatically fill in values. So all of this has helped make it faster to enter the data and make more accurate, give a chance for people to capture more accurate data because they don't need to be typing in every single thing manually all the time. Okay, so that's the equipment inspection overview. Dave, should we pause for any questions here, or should I dive into the how this was built?
Let's take a couple of questions. So the first one is, first of all, can multiple images be captured for each of the devices inspected? And if so, how do they appear in the app if you were to do that? I don't know if you want to answer that, or I can, either one.
While you're answering, I'll go ahead and take a couple of pictures and we can show it live.
That sounds great. So yeah, if you wanted to do multiple pictures, and in fact, if you didn't know how many pictures you were going to take, in this case, I think he has 2 hard-coded fields for that, but you could always put in a data group and include a photo field in that data group. And with a data group, you can create as many or as few as you need. And I believe that Nikos showed that to you with the example of the generators, in which he had 4 hard-coded spots for generators. But if he had used a data group instead, you could do multiple. And I said they do appear one after the other. If you'd like to, you could put them on separate tabs or pages if that made it easier. Another question that we had was, will this template be available? Yes, it certainly will be. Send an email to tfservice@alphasoftware.com, and I will send out this latest version of the inspection application directly from Nikos to you. So just let us know, and eventually we'll make this part of the templates which show up in the software itself. Speaking of templates and learning tools, one of the other questions we had is how much training is required to become fairly proficient with TransForm, and where's training available? So we do have a professional services team which will train you in TransForm. We'll teach as well as Alpha Anywhere. We have done that for clients, for some larger clients, but we'll do it really for any size. How long do you think it takes to become proficient, let's say, at building apps, Nikos? It's certainly not anywhere in the realm of what it takes to build them in Alpha Anywhere, right? I mean, you can be building useful apps within a day or so, but when you start getting under the covers and you start messing around with TPL and understanding some of the more complicated commands, the if commands and so on, couple weeks, 3 weeks, a month? What do you think is kind of fair for that, Nikos? I don't know if you have a And I'm putting you on the spot, but I know you do work with people who are learning this stuff. So what's been your experience?
So the experience is that while TPL is a programming language and comes with the flexibility but together with a complexity of needing to code, the advantage with Transform is that it is a focused app. It is not like an Alpha Anywhere app which has dozens of different components and so many different ways that you can configure from the graphical user interface to the data components to the connectivity to the backend. All of those in Alpha Anywhere, essentially, you pick from a large component set and then you connect and configure them manually one by one. In Transform, most of that is built in for you because it is a more focused app. And in that respect, while TPL is there as a mechanism and as a capability, it is not even nearly similar in complexity to code because you're only addressing a specific subset of functionality that you might want to do. And while there are 100+ functions in TPL where you can do programming like actions, in reality, there's a limited subset of things that you would really want to do. Do a lookup, do a validation on a field, set a value of a field to something else based on a calculation. So I would say that even multiple weeks sounds, the limit of what someone might need to be producing complex apps in that respect. And remember, as you said, David, because when we are able to give out, so that the app that you're seeing today and all the capabilities that you saw today are really just a page and a half of code and 6-7 specific functions. You can reuse those. They will be in the samples. It's like practical documentation that you might have for what you want to do. So the next time you want to do a Google Sheets lookup, you don't really need to understand how TPL works to do that. You just go to the relevant procedure, see how that code works, and just replace your parts with whatever is needed, your Google Sheet link and your API key, and it will work. And just choose the fields that you want to look up. So definitely a magnitude of effort less with Transform that would be with Alpha Anywhere, and not to dismiss Alpha Anywhere, which is already a faster method than you would need to build a normal native app from scratch to be able to connect the backend, do login authentication, data-driven, all the things that we're doing here. So I would not let anyone be intimidated by any complexity shown here. Everything that we've shown is really just a capability and an enhancement and a way out for issues that you might find along the way and you might need as you're building your app and expanding it to satisfy the business requirement in each case.
That's great. Thanks very much. Again, we will share this template with you if you send an email to TF as in transform service at alphasoftware.com. But actually, just from a show of hands or a show of yeses, how many people would like a copy of this template? Because if I get enough of them, I might just send it to everyone without you having to ask. There's a whole bunch of yeses. Okay, great. Well, don't worry about it. I'll send anyone who's registered for today's webinar, I will send that out to you probably by tomorrow. You should have it in your inbox. All right, so let's dive in and see how this app was actually put together. I'm kind of curious. And thanks, guys, for staying late. I know this is typically a 30-minute webinar, but it looks like people are hanging out with us. So I don't know. What do you think? We have another 10 minutes or so to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
all right,
so what I want to show before diving in, because I did say I would explain why I'm showing the tablet option here, is that one of the things you may have noticed is that in some of the screens, instead of the static one field per line layout that we have, we are now capable of showing multiple fields per line. And if this works correctly, and it should, you'll see that as I extend it and turn it sideways, this is responsive, extending to the size of the screen. So this is not in the release yet, so I might be teasing people, but I think it's a few days away from release.
Our anticipated release date for this feature is tomorrow, so
excellent.
It'll be as soon as that. Just all right, yeah.
Okay, so the advantage is that we are able to do now responsive layouts, and when we say responsive, it is not only to a fixed size, but it even relative to the size of the device that you're working on. So you can say, I want a different layout for a portrait smartphone, a different layout for a landscape tablet, a category of sizes, and so on. And you can do amazing combinations, which are how many fields per line, what are their width ratios. So if I have a simple ID field, which is just 2 digits, and then a description field, which is a long text description, I can set the ratios differently to say, the ID one will be 1/5 of the width of the text one. And these kind of layouts can really take advantage of a screen size of the type of a tablet offers you, because that now really brings an almost mirroring of an A4 printed sheet, which is a pretty standard way to create a paper form, that will actually work on a mobile device, because the size of the screen matters. Your finger needs to be comparable to the size of the field, so that when tapping it, you're tapping on the correct field. So this allows you to take advantage of all the space that you have on a large screen and be able to mirror a longer, more complex form better, much more easily on the device. And remember, this is just an 8-inch tablet. Obviously, there are 9.7, 10.1-inch tablets which offer even more screen size. So let's jump in and show a couple of interesting things. So for those of you who have not seen this before, the designer is where we create the form. So we have just enlarge this a little. So we have our fields listing here. So all of the fields that we want to capture, plus pages, titles, headings, sections, are all shown, are all added here via a long list of controls and components that we might want to add to our form. So all of this is really added to a form. This is the preview of what it would look like on mobile. And then as this form is created and saved, any new form type or any updates to the existing one is pushed out to mobile. So when the mobile device syncs, it gets the latest version or the new form that was there. So the feature that will be coming tomorrow, which has to do with the layout, is this one. So previously, we just had fields one below the other, and that's how they appeared. You could not set multiple fields on the same line. What we have now is that if we have a set of fields, and they can be on one line, they can be on multiple lines. If we have a set of fields that we want to lay out in a specific way, we enclose them in a section start, section end, and now each of them get a layout property. So the layout of the section gives us categories of devices. Remember the smartphone, portrait, tablet, landscape, and anything in between. And for the section, so the container of everything, I set the number of columns, visual indents, borders, width, height, and position. So for section, for the enclosure, for the container, only the number of columns is really important. But then inside of it, each field also gets relative layout settings. And we could say that, this field has a width of 1, but it have a width of 2 columns out of the 3. And then the other one would skip to the bottom. I can have it take up 1 unit of height or more. So I can have an image on one side of the layout, and then text fields, multiple text fields to the side, like you do with a normal photo on a web page. So this layout capability is what allow, and this is responsive. So this automatically scales, as you saw, to fit the width. The section, the container, automatically spans the full width of the device. So, and responsively as the device changes orientation. So this is what allows you now to not only make more rich interfaces and layouts on a smartphone, because already even on a smartphone, if there are short enough fields, this is already a useful feature, but much more so on a tablet. So this is something that was really useful to have. And again, going back to Dave, a previous comment, there are not many let's say alternatives to digital form alternative products that allow the type of capability. Also, obviously in alpha anyway, you could build something like this, but most of the standard form designer type products do not have such a rich layout functionality. It's just fields one below the other. So this is how we built our form. Just one more interesting point here before we jump to the code, how we did our multiple checklists. So remember we had 2 checklists that said, if I have a generator, that's the list of questions I show. If I have a boiler, this is the type of question. So this is how we do it. We have a separate page when we start our checklist. And then we have an if statement, a condition that checks what the field of equipment type was set to. If it was set to generator, then just when it's inside an if statement, that means show this set of fields if the condition is true, hide it if false. So we just set multiple if conditions, and within them are a set of questions. Only one will be displayed, the one corresponding to the value that was chosen for the equipment type. But remember, this is for each item. When we add a second item, all of this is created again and again and again. Why? Because all this is inside a data group. That is really the flexibility. Anything you include in a data group is repeated an arbitrary number of times. As long as you keep pressing the plus button, you get a new set of all these. And within those, as we showed here, conditional hide show based on the value that was selected for each of the increments, for each of the new instances that appear. Okay. So now let's jump to the code. So each form, apart from the form commands that we have there, also has a code editor where we enter our TPL code. And our TPL code works in an event-driven method. So everything that we have on our form has a number of events that are associated with it. Our form in general has a number of these, but then also our fields have the two basic ones at least, which are editor and change. And this is how all of this code section works, because when we click to enter, remember when we click the site code and got a drop down, that is the editor event. That means I'm going inside a field to edit it. And changed is what happened after I selected a value. So after I entered a value into this field, the change event fires. So the type of code that I need to run, so these are all my elements. So when I said pick on editor equipment files, and I don't know if you can read this, but again, you'll get the sample, so you'll be able to go through it there. What I'm doing is I'm saying the moment I click on the equipment files selection list, I do a local query on my on-device database. I get the results back. I translate through them, and then when I find a match, that's the one I show, and I populate my list with my field with. Okay. Similarly for others, when the site code is selected, then if it's Google Sheets, then that's what you need to do. If it's SQL, a local device on database, this is what you need to do. Now, this may seem more complex than the form builder that we had before, but remember, this is repeatable. In any one scenario, there is a standard code in here, which is this, for example, how to do an SQL statement, and the customized, which is what fields am I exactly picking out of that query and where I need to store them on my form. And that's really all this is. Okay, so you'll be able to see and follow this and see how this works. That's really all there is to it. Okay, so it's not maybe 1.5 pages, maybe it's more, but it's straightforward. It is the help here. Again, is more than 100 functions. Each of them has help for what it does, but most of these are standard. Fill in a field with a specific value, or do a calculation, or launch an in-app browser like you see here. So what I'm doing is I'm saying I have a latitude field on my form, which I filled in automatically, and I have a longitude field on the form, which I filled in automatically. Okay, just launch an in-app browser to this URL and pass in the lat long construct that I built here, and that's it. That's all that's needed. Okay, so having this in place and all the capabilities that you see here are really what allow those advanced functions of lookups, either on device or off device. And if I may quickly jump out, Dave, I don't know if you've covered the on device data, how that is configured. Should I just spend a minute to describe how that is done?
Absolutely. I know we have a lot of questions on that. So yeah, if you could do that, that'd be great.
Okay, so there is here on the Home tab, there is a on-device assets section. And there's a description for how we define a manifest file and what that manifest file contains. So in reality, what happens is that I have a file storage somewhere, a web server that just serves out this file. And let me just open up this file for you to see it. Okay, so that's what this file has. It's just a JSON file that says there are 2 files that I need you to download on the device. And remember, this is done automatically. The moment I define this on my Home tab, this is now the default behavior for any user logging into their mobile app, to the Filler app. So when the Filler app launches and people log in, it checks the manifest file, it checks the links, and downloads the files if it doesn't already have them, and stores them on the device. So what this manifest file is telling the mobile app is that you need to get two files out of the server: this file and this file. This file is the SQLite database, and this is a set of files which actually, in my equipment inspection example here, are the PDFs that you saw, the data sheets for the equipment. Okay, I also have a version here. So when logging in for the first time and downloading these files, when we next log in and the check is done again, if these files are already found in the device and the version number has not changed, these are not downloaded again. But if I update suddenly my database with 10 new sites or 20 new items of equipment, all I need to do is upload it to my central location and change the version number in my manifest file. The moment I do that, when on next login, it checks and sees that the version that is online is larger than the version that is stored on the device, so that it downloads only that part, only that section which was updated. Okay, so for the document.
Sorry, can I interrupt you just for a second, because I have a question that's directly related to what you're going over, and that is, you said that for the manifest file, that manifest file is for the whole account, right? You can't have different manifest files for different users, or at least not at this point. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is global. This is account wide.
It's global, and that's how it's set up for now. Yeah,
exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. So so the files are downloaded onto the device with the versions, as we said, and after that point, the moment they're on the device, they are now accessible with the methods that we showed in the designer. So if you have an on-device database, which is called equipment inspection, that's how I was able to do my TPL query that you saw here for my SQL code. So if I go to my, this is the file that was extracted from that zip file that I got. And because I know that's the file, because I'm the one that placed it there, I can now do an execute SQL against this file, and I know that this file has been downloaded to my device. Okay, so that's how the on-device assets works. And again, this applies to any type of files. I can have databases where I can do lookups. I can have single images, or I can have a folder of images that are placed under the account folder on the device and are accessible again via a relative path from your TPL code.
Very cool. Now,
the advantage here is the syncing, that you only need to do that once centrally here. And then if you have 50, 60, 20 devices, you know that all of them, the moment they log in, are gonna download that data.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so question for you. We don't have enough time right now to go through the code line by line, but can you at least show in this app where your code is for doing that lookup to the SQLite database and doing that lookup to the Google Sheets database? Because when people get a hold of your template, they're going to want to take a look at that. I understand you'll pull the API code, API key out of your code before you send it for the Google one, but
I will. Okay. But let's see it now. So
just do a little tour. Yep.
So this is the Google Sheets code.
Okay.
This is saying the moment I click the site code field, I need to do a lookup for the site codes, BOSS 001, BOS 002, and so on. Where do I get that data from? Remember, I had a button which said, what's my data source? Is it Google Sheets or is it SQLite? Is it the on-device database? So I just set a flag. And the flag defines if I'm doing my query on Google Sheets or if I'm doing my query on the on-device database. If I'm doing it on Google Sheets, I need this URL, which says, actually, this is very interesting to show. When I have my Google Sheet, it has a unique ID, a document ID, which is this part here. Whenever you create your new Google Sheet, you'll have something that looks like this.
Okay.
So what you need to do is take this part out, move it into your URL here. This is it, this part. Set your columns that you're searching. I just search A to Z. And then use your API key. This is my API key. Obviously, you'd use your own here. You go to Google, the console of your Google account, and just create a new API key for Google Sheets. Okay, and it's a URL. It's an AJAX get. So AJAX get is our standard function to do an AJAX callback and get back results. And if there's no error, we parse the response, because the response from this URL comes back as JSON. And I go through and just get the first row, the first column. So for each of the rows that are there in my result, I get the first column, column 0, which is BOS 001, BOS 00, and so on. Okay, and then I use this construct to say, based on these are the values that appear in the dropdown. So when I say sqlist equals list, the array that I just built up, my field, my list field, will show the values that I just assigned to it here. That is via Google Sheets. If I do it via the on-device database, I have a different function, which is PhoneGap execute SQL, and I need to add here that you will not find this function documented here, because it is under modification for adding various security enforcements to make sure what is being done is valid for that file and that account. So you will have to rely on this, method.
So just use your code example for now. Okay, great. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I get the results back, and I do the same thing. I assign the sqlist construct to the data that just got back. Again, I'm building up my BOS 001, 002 list out of the results I got from the query. So that is what produces my updated values in my drop-down list dynamically from a remote API lookup or from a local lookup on the DB.
Cool.
Okay. And what I do here is I say, okay, once I got that data, I update a global variable with the data that I just got back. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to use this in another function, which is the onChanged. Remember, we said the moment I pick BOS 0001, I need to go to my site section, my site details section, and fill in address, city, say zip, country, lat long. So that's how I do it. I'm using the global variable, which has the data that just came back from Google Sheets or from the on-device one. And I'm filling in the fields. Now, these are now fields on the form. Hash field means hash text means the field called address on the form. And I fill it in as I'm building it one by one with the values that came back. Okay. And if I don't find anything, I just clear the site fields. I launch a user defined function, which I have here, which is the clear site fields, which just does this. If nothing came back, just clear everything. So pretty straightforward for how this works assignment wise.
It's still coding, but if we steal your code and put in our own parameters, it becomes a lot easier, doesn't it? So
yes, absolutely.
that's the plan. So
Absolutely.
Nikos, I need to wrap it up now. We've actually run 33 minutes over, and you know what? Just about everyone stayed to the end. So I want to thank you, Nikos, for presenting. And thanks everyone who stuck around with us. I will send out an email probably tomorrow with a link to this application that Nikos has built, the form design, and instructions on how you can insert it into your own account. In the meantime, if you do have other questions, send them to TF, as in TransForm, service @alphasoftware.com. Thanks again, Nikos. This was terrific. And
my pleasure.
See you guys.
Great.
Y'all next week at the next TransForm Tuesday. Take care and goodbye.
Cheers.